Joining us now for some insight into the trial is Austin Defense Attorney Logan Campbell. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's start with some of the newest developments today. It had been discussed that possibly Hunter Biden would testify in his own defense. This morning, his lawyers decided that he would not. Is that a good move? What are the pros and cons of this?
I would say that, at least in my experience, in a criminal case, the overwhelming majority of the time, a defendant chooses not to testify. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's because they're guilty. It can be a variety of other reasons. One strategy is that you want to keep the burden of proof on the prosecution. The prosecution has to prove each and every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And at no point in the trial does that burden shift on the defense, where the defense is having to put on testimony or evidence to rebut the prosecution's case. And so one reason to not testify is that you want to keep that burden of proof on the prosecution. But also, when a defendant testifies, you're not just getting up in front of a jury and telling your story, answering the questions from your defense attorney, you're also subjecting yourself to cross-examination. And this cross-examination is going to be by a well-educated, seasoned, trained prosecutor that is going to, what's called lead you, ask you leading questions in order to direct you to give an answer that they want you to give. So, yeah, different pros and cons to not testify. We'll see how it turns out.
And let's talk about Hunter Biden's defense. Part of that is that he didn't knowingly lie on a gun form that asked him if he was an addict, because he said really at that time, although he didn't get sober until the next year, he didn't consider himself an addict at that time. So at the time he filled out the form. How strong is that defense?
It's hard for me to say that it's a strong defense, but it's certainly a defense that can cause enough confusion in the jury room. It can raise questions, and again, the burden of proof rests on the prosecution here, and they must prove each and every element of the case beyond a reasonable doubt. One of that key elements being knowingly. What I anticipate the defense is trying to do here, part of their strategy, is they're going to argue that being a drug user, drug addict, it's very common for that individual, while they're in the state of using drugs, to be in denial. And if you're in that state of denial, then it's possible that maybe you didn't knowingly lie on that document. Again, not saying it's a strong defense, but sometimes if you have a juror that's looking to acquit an individual, sometimes you just need to give them a reason to do so.
If you were his lawyer, would you present that as a defense?
No.
I kind of figured. So let's talk about the fact that this trial may not have even happened because last year federal officials offered Hunter Biden a deal. It looked like he was going to take it, then the deal fell through. What can you tell us about the terms of that deal and why it did ultimately fall through?
Right, so we're currently on trial for this firearm charge for alleging that Hunter Biden lied on a federal document to obtain a firearm. But it's important to note that those aren't the only criminal charges Hunter Biden is facing. He also has tax evasion charges arising out of California. The plea bargain agreement was going to encompass all of those cases. He was going to plead guilty to 2 different counts of misdemeanor tax evasion, and as part of that plea bargain agreement, this firearm charge that he's on trial for now, that was ultimately going to be dismissed pursuant to a diversion agreement. Also in that plea bargain agreement, as we learned later, there were issues as far as immunity goes, and that kind of complicated things and had the plea bargain agreement fall through.
And we know that Republicans have said that that deal was preferential treatment for the president's son. Is it common, though, in these type of cases to have that kind of deal?
It's hard to say, right, because this is a very uncommon case. We do know that Hunter Biden was being investigated for crimes not specifically related to the crimes that he's indicted on, and he's also the son of a sitting U.S. president. So you can't really point to another set of circumstances or another defendant and say this is a plea bargain agreement that is in line with what has been done in the past, because again, this is a very unique sort of set of circumstances.
We've had a lot of unprecedented trials lately, that's for sure, in the political field. All right, thank you so much, Logan Campbell, for joining us today.
Again, thanks for having me.
Sure.